Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Devar Yerushalayim in Har Nof, Jerusalem. This is Sheviis, chapter 4, Halacha 1. One of the things to keep in mind is when the Jews were entering the land with Yeshua after Moshe Rabbeinu died, Yeshua instituted a few things for the Jews entering the land. One of the things that was instituted by Yeshua was that you are allowed to go gather grasses and even from another person's field and use it for, bringing for your animals. So you're not allowed to go and have your animals go and eat on your neighbor's field as pasture. That you're not allowed to do. It's stealing. But if you see weeds and all sorts of long grasses that are basically what Yeshua was talking about, whenever you go for a walk throughout the Jerusalem forest, you'll see these just long, scrubby grasses. This is what you're allowed to pick, and it makes very good feed for smaller animals like a donkey. You have to, feed your donkey. And in fact, part of the consideration for this is that this would actually be helping your neighbor out because these have a lot of seeds and they spread all over the place. And if you have the intention of coming and developing and settling the land, well, you don't want these weeds getting mixed in with your crop because they're going to steal sunshine from your crop. They're going to steal water from your crop, nutrients from the soil from your crop. And Yeshua was very cognizant of the idea that, hey, we're settling the land. And this is a step of helping to settling the land. You're doing your neighbor a favor by clearing out this scrub grass because you're making the land more arable. You're making the land better for planting. Now, the issue is going to come up with Sheviis, and we're going to get into that today. So, the Mishnah starts out, chapter 4, Halacha 1 of Sheviis, and it says, initially the rabbis used to say that a person may gather sticks, stones, and grasses from his field in the same manner that he gathers from his neighbor's field. So this is going to be in a way that doesn't look like you're clearing a field and getting it ready to be planting. So one of the ideas is that the rabbis did not impose any restrictions on gathering these items in someone else's field because ordinarily you're not going to go clear someone else's field for planting. So it doesn't give the impression that he's actually preparing the field for planting. And the Rambam says that we're not concerned that he will actually intend to benefit the field, and by doing so, it doesn't give the impression that he's going to clear his neighbor's field so that his neighbor can go plant. It takes a lot of energy to clear it up, and you have your own things to do. The Mishnah, according to the Rambam, is basically teaching that the rabbis originally allowed a person to gather these items from his own field in the same way that he was allowed to gather from his neighbor's field. Keep in mind, gathering grasses from a neighbor's field, that's going to be allowed by Yeshua when the Jews enter the land. And again, it's because you're actually helping your neighbor. Yeah, you're helping yourself. You're getting food for your donkey, but you're actually clearing up the scrub grass that would be competing and making the crops less good, or you're setting up the area where he'll be able to start using more of the land for agriculture. So you're actually, benefiting it. But the idea, according to the Rambam, is that by not arousing any suspicion of these illegal intentions where you're trying to gather on someone else's field, then it's ensuring that the intention is really for the purpose of using these items and not just to clear the field. Now, the Mishnah is going to explain about a person who's collecting in his own field, because that's certainly going to be, more of a, question mark, because, it's going to look like, hey, maybe he's, trying to clear up this scrub grass from his own field so he can plant more later. Now, what about family members? What about relatives? Well, it's not unusual for a person to go help his relatives and help his relatives' field. So perhaps if they're family members, then it's going to get to this, suspicion. Now, again, initially the rabbis used to allow somebody to gather this stuff in the same manner as he gathered from his neighbor's field. But we're going to continue. The Mishnah says that he is permitted to gather only the large sticks, the stones, and the grasses from his field. And the idea here, says the Pnei Moshe, is that if he were to clear out even the smaller sticks, the smaller stones, and the smaller grasses, it would arouse suspicion of his intention, and people would suspect that he's getting ready to clear the field. He doesn't really need this material. He's going to go and get everything ready for planting in the Sheviis year, so he can harvest in the 8th year. Now, why would you allow gathering grasses from your own field? Because you could say, wait a second, he's really going to use this field. He's a farmer. And the Torah does allow wild animals to graze from the fields. And you're also, if you have a donkey, you have to feed your donkey. You're not allowed to have cruelty to animals. And so you might actually need these grasses to feed your donkey. So the idea is that you're taking out these scrub grasses because he's needing these not to go and plow his field or increase his, the area that he could theoretically plow. He's taking this material not for the agricultural reason. He's taking it because he has to feed his donkey now. He has to go and load some, take a load and, haul it somewhere or something like that, or just to maintain his donkeys. And, you need something to feed him. So you're taking the grasses from the field because you're trying to feed the donkey. Now, the worry is that you're going to create this suspicion with Morris Ein. So the rabbis were permitting him to gather the larger items and leaving the smaller ones. It would be obvious that his intention is to gather this larger material, and it's not to clear the field or some other purpose like trying to get things ready so that you can make your arable land bigger. You're really taking these sticks because you need the firewood, or you really need, and again, these are not small sticks. These are like big sticks. You're clearing it out because you actually need firewood, or you need to make charcoal, which is made from firewood, or you need to feed your donkey. You need these, rip out these scrubby grasses that grow throughout the Jerusalem hills that are pretty big, and they're grassy but big and dense. And he's doing it because he needs to feed his donkey, not because he wants to, plow and field, and farm there next year. And if he didn't rip out this scrub grass in that area, he wouldn't be able to use it for farming. He's actually using it for this other purpose. So originally, it was permitted to gather even these small items from the neighbor's field, but in his own field, he was required to leave the smaller ones behind. Now, this isn't a case where his actual intent is in collecting these items and it's not to clear the field for planting. And if it's going to be, says the Chazan Ish, that it's his intent for planting, then it's going to be prohibited. And some of the commentary is that it's uncertain whether this prohibition extends even to a case where the person's intent is not to clear the field, but he nevertheless is pleased that his field is prepared for planting. So that could be another issue. Large, what are large sticks? Well, this law is not going to be provided, and from the Gemara, it's going to be clear there's no specific measurement as to what constitutes a large stone or large grass or large sticks. The point is that the collector's trying to show some sort of disregard for these smaller ones, and really the setup that the rabbis made is that they're trying to make sure that it's obvious that this person who's in the field collecting just the big items and leaving the smaller ones is showing that he's demonstrating to his neighbors that he doesn't want to use it for clearing the field. He's taking it away because he needs this material. What about medium-sized ones? So even medium-sized ones, he's going to have to disregard because that's not a large one. This is only permitting large ones. So these like large scrub grasses, these are what you can take away for your donkey, or these large sticks. Also for the large stones that we were talking about in the end of chapter 3, they were saying it's a shoulder stone. In other words, that you can take, say, 2 of them and carry them on your shoulders. These are large, and it's showing that you're needing this for construction. You're not needing this because you don't want to plow across it in the 8th year, because running a plow across big stones, you're going to break apart your plow. You're going to break all the metal on it or dent it so it doesn't work as well. And so you want to make, it's nice to make sure that stuff isn't there. And hey, if the field is sitting fallow anyway, but you could play a game and you can try to clear away these stones that you really don't want to have there in the 8th year. What a nice time to do it, right? Well, that's illegal. You can't do it. So they're trying to make sure that this is really being used for the material, and it's not being used to set things up to make it easier for yourself to plow in the 8th year or to start farming in the 8th year. Now, the Mishnah continues and says, but when the transgressors increased and there was widespread abuse of this law, the rabbis instituted that one may not gather any of these items, even the large ones, from his own field. Rather, this one may gather sticks, stones, and grasses from the field of that one, and that one may gather sticks, stones, and grasses from the field of this one without benefit, and needless to say, without apportioning food to them. So the idea here is that you're not allowed to show any appreciation to the person who's collecting it because it is compensation. You're effectively paying the person. And the Rambam, in his commentary in the Mishnah, says that a person cannot say, gather from my field and I will give you food. And this is basically setting up a work contract where the food is the payment. Now, it's not uncommon for field owners to supply people working in the field with food. We know that with people who are harvesting figs and your workers harvesting figs, and you would let them have figs. And in fact, the Torah even lets them eat the figs. But in this case, you're not even allowed to do that. And even if you're not giving them a lot of food, even if you're giving them a smaller amount than you would be giving to a worker, you're not allowed to do it. Now, one of the things about this is that they're trying to cut this off so that, because there's a lot of transgressors, and they're trying to cut it off so that if you want to go get these essential grasses that you need to go and feed your donkey, just like what Yeshua set up when the Jews were, coming into the land, go to your neighbor's field, go get the grasses there. And by the way, the halacha is that, anybody has access to gather the grasses from your field as well. This is not talking about letting somebody's sheep come roam onto your land and eat your grass, because that is something that you own. That's your grass for your sheep. If somebody comes and grazes their sheep on your lawn and your field, well, they're stealing from you, because now your sheep can't eat, or your donkeys and horses can't eat. So that's problematic. But these scrub grasses that are shrubby and big and dense, and certainly be kind of problematic to try to plow around and whatever, if you want to go gather that stuff up, sure, donkeys, goats, sheep, cows, they'll eat that stuff. And they're trying to say that, hey, if you need sticks for firewood, go to your neighbor's field. You're allowed to go gather sticks. You're doing him a favor. You can't take it from your field because of the Morrisine issue now. There's too many transgressors. But go take it from your neighbor's field. And, you're helping him out. He doesn't, what's he going to do with, these sticks? Yeah, okay, fine. He, would like to have them for firewood for himself, but the problem is it looks like he's going to be clearing it out to set things up for his own field for plowing, and there's too many people cheating and playing games. So if you want firewood, you can go to your neighbor's area and gather from over there. Also for stones. Now, again, you can't, it has to be without benefit. In other words, that, yes, says the Rambam, the rabbis permitted one to gather these items from someone else's field, and they prohibited doing so if it was part of a prearranged deal to compensate the collector in any way. For example, says the Rambam, you cannot say, if you will gather from my field, I will gather from your field. And the idea is that, the collector may not even tell the field owner, look at the favor I've done for you. So, according to the Rambam, he's saying in this commentary in the Mishnah that one may, gather even the smaller items from someone else's field. So again, if you have these mid-size sticks, you're allowed to take that from someone else's field. But you're in the old days, you were limited to only the larger sticks and the larger grasses and the larger stones from your own field. Couldn't take medium-sized ones. But after the rabbis instituted this, if you see some medium-sized sticks over in your neighbor's field and you want to collect them from firewood, you're not prohibited to do it. So, the idea is that, these larger items could also be taken, just not from your field, and you certainly can't take the small, medium, and large ones from your field as well. Because again, people are worried about cheating, and there's too many cheaters, so they had to set this up. Aval. The Gemara is going to talk about what the rabbis used to say, how the system used to be. And the Gemara is going to talk about, the final portion of this ruling, which is stating that a person was granted in his land at this time, which was later repealed, to gather only the large sticks, stones, and grasses. And about this, Rabbi Yonah says in this Gemara, so should the Mishnah be understood as teaching. At first, the rabbis used to say that a person may gather the large sticks and grasses from his field, and in the same manner that he gathers from his neighbor's field both small and large ones, when the situation deteriorated and the people were suspected of gathering even the smaller ones from their own field and pretending it to be within their rights, they would say, we have gathered only the larger ones. So here, this is talking about why this rule was repealed, because they were taking the small ones and saying these are large ones. So the Gemara says that the rabbis instituted that one may not gather any of these items, even the large ones, from his own field. And, the Mishnah is stating that the rabbis instituted this new enactment in order to counteract widespread abuse of the original law. So the question would be, what's the point of this new enactment? Because people will gather from their own field as well, regardless of whether there's an enactment or not, and cheat. And Rabbi Yonah is basically explaining that the transgressors at this time did not openly defy rabbinic decrees, but only pretended to be within their rights. And then if it was within their rights, they would play games with it. That's what these kind of people were like. So what they did was they instituted that you may not gather anything from your field, and basically it took away the pretext of this excuse for this illegal kind of behavior. So we see that kind of behavior today, where, in New York City, they were allowing non-married women to go to the mikveh. I don't know if they repealed that. And the people were saying, okay, I went to the mikveh, it's okay. And they're playing games with it, because you have to get married. You're not supposed to be doing that stuff and playing games with it. Or what they'll say is they said that, now the rabbis let us wear nail polish in the mikveh, so it's okay to wear nail polish all the time. And basically, the rabbis in New York City instituted that you can wear the nail polish because the women were not taking off the nail polish and not going to the mikveh. So rather than take off the nail polish, they wouldn't go to the mikveh. So they said, okay, fine, keep the nail polish on, still a chatzitza, but go to the mikveh. So basically, what this is these are same kinds of games, same kind of mentality, where people want to take these illegal actions, and they want to play games with the law, and they were doing the same thing. So they said, okay, the rabbis allowed that I can take the big items from my field, and instead, I'm going to take the small ones too. And then when people questioned it, they said, these are big, mapito, what are you talking about? These are big sticks. These are big shrubs. But they're not. And it's clear that they were playing games. So they said, okay, not from your field, not anything. You can take from your neighbor's field without any prearrangement, without any compensation. So the Gemara is going to continue. It's going to say, rather, this one may gather sticks and grasses from the field of that one, and that one may gather sticks and grasses from the field of this one without any benefit. Now, Rabbi Yonah is reporting that, after this revision mentioned in the Mishnah, the situation deteriorates even further. It gets even worse, and they have to put in a new enactment. Now, Bryce is going to talk about it. It's going to say, when the situation deteriorates again, and the people were suspected of gathering from other people's fields in exchange for some benefit, and pretending that this was not the case, they would say, we have gathered it without benefit. And the rabbis instituted that the people bring and collect only from what is close and available. So here's what was happening. Basically, they're saying that you can only go to ownerless areas now. You can't go to your neighbor's field. And according to this new enactment, no gathering at all was allowed in any of these private fields. And so that if you had anybody removing any of the sticks for firewood from any of the people's field, it would be an open violation of rabbinic enactment. And basically, the rabbis were removing any pretense for the people's illegal actions. Basically, what was happening was the people were making these deals, and in a roundabout way, And they were basically making these arrangements where, this farmer would come to this guy's field and they would compensate him in some way. Or they'd make a pre-arrangement and say, you do my field, I'll do your field, and it'll even out. You're not allowed to do it. So, the Jews themselves were not following the spirit of the law. So they said, okay, no problem. To make sure that this collection is done without benefit, and to make sure that, you can't compensate this person in any way, no problem. Just, go find an ownerless area and you can only collect from there, because guess what? Nobody's plowing from an ownerless area. And guess what? If you need firewood and you're going to an ownerless area and you're collecting now the big sticks because you don't want to sit there and waste your time looking around, poking around for small sticks and then hauling them and unloading them and everything else, you're really going to be doing the law the right way. You're really going to be going to this ownerless area to get the big shrub grass and, setting it up so that you can feed your donkey. And you're going to really be getting the bigger stones for construction. And you're not going to be playing a game where you're setting your field up for easier production in the 8th year, or to help your neighbor out so that, he can get into production earlier and there's some sort of deal and compensation. If you really need this material, go find an ownerless field, and that guaranteed there's no more corruption and compensation on it. So, the Gemara, the Gemara is clear what it says. It says, when this situation again deteriorates, the people were suspected of gathering from other people's field in exchange for some benefit and pretending that this was not the case, and they would say, we gathered without benefit. And the rabbis instituted that the people would bring and collect only from that which is close and available. And there's going to be another Amarah who comments on Rabbi Yonah's report. And Rabbi Zera says the first 2 enactments exist, and the last enactment reported by Rabbi Yonah does not exist. So he's basically saying that Rabbi Zera's maintaining that this Tosefta that is mentioned here is not authoritative and was not taught in the study hall of the sages, and it's demonstrated by the fact that the Mishnah is citing the first 2 enactments and not the third one, and this one is permitted to collect these items from another person's field and is not restricted in collecting only that which is close and available. So the Chazan Ish has a slightly different explanation of Rabbi Zera's statement. He's saying that there is a rule that a decree enacted by the rabbis that for whatever reason is not accepted by the nation is not binding. And basically Rabbi Zera says the Chazan Ish is reporting that this is an example of such an enactment, that the people never adopted the practice of collecting that from what is close and available in this ownerless territory, and thus the 2 first enactments achieved permanence and the last one did not, because the rabbis instituted and the people just didn't accept it. So the Gemara here, by the way, just FYI, this is going to be the source of Rambam's Halacha and ruling in Hilchos Shemitah 2:16, where he's saying that you can collect from another person's field without restrictions. And the Rambam is omitting the last enactment that Rabbi Yonah reports. That's also cited in the Tosefta 3:5, and that's also referred to by Rabbi Zera. And I think that the Chazan Ish's example, which comes in his book in 1915 in his Beur, that is a good explanation, because this is an enactment that did not stick. So the Gemara is going to continue. It's going to say there's an exception to this rule prohibiting gathering small and large sticks or grasses from your own field. And here's what it is. The Gemara says, if his animal is there with him in his field, he may gather grasses for his animal to eat, because his animal demonstrates about him that his intention is to feed the animal and it's not to clear the field. So the Chazan Ish says that since the animal is with him, it is obvious that his intention is to collect the grass as animal feed, and it's not to set up a situation to plow the field later. And as such, he is permitted to collect not only the large ones, but even the small ones, because he's taking the material not for an agricultural thing. He's taking the material to feed his animal. And it's there. There's no Marasign issue there. You see the animal, eating, because you have to feed your donkeys. You have to feed your cattle. You have to feed your things. So, you can take even the small ones and do that. So here too, he's even permitted to collect, this smaller quantity of dry grass in these areas. Not all of the areas are big and bushy. Some of them might have some dry grass in smaller clusters, and you can take even that. Now, regarding the sticks, the Gemara is going to continue. It's going to say, if his oven is there with him in the field, he may gather sticks and dry grasses to fire his oven, because his oven demonstrates about him is that his intention is to fire his oven and not clear his field. I can tell you that I've taken vacations with my wife in the north, and we have a little barbecue that we bring with us, and we'll bring some nice whole chickens and wrap them up and barbecue them. And many times to run the barbecue, I just use, grasses that I gather there, and I light them on fire, and I put small sticks there. I don't bring any charcoal, and I run it all with small sticks. So if somebody is clearly doing something similar, where they're, sort of in a wild area, and they're going to gather sticks and have a barbecue, it's obvious he has his little barbecue there, and he's clear what he's doing. You can take the small sticks. He's using it for firewood. You can take this small shrubbery and small grass and use it for a starter to get your fire going. There's nothing wrong with that. So, it's clear here that his intention is to, use this as fuel for the oven or the barbecue, and it's not his intention to clear it out for farming, and everybody can see it, and there's no Marasign issue. So the Gemara was talking about where the rabbis allowed a person to gather only these large sticks and stones and grasses from his own field, but required him to leave the smaller ones so that his activity does not look like clearing the field for planting. The Gemara gives another inquiry on this rule. And so the Gemara says, if one gathered the large stones and left the smaller ones, what is the law with regard to whether he may gather a second time and gather from the larger ones the remaining smaller ones? In other words, let's say he goes and he takes all of the smaller ones. Now, there's no specific mention of what's a smaller one, what's a medium one, what's a larger one. What this is saying is, what happens if he takes out all of the larger ones, the biggest ones out? Can he come back and take the next largest ones after that a second time? Because what he would be coming back for a second time would have been considered a medium-sized one. Now, it's a large one. That's the largest one left. But before, when there was bigger ones there before and he took the bigger ones, those ones were medium ones. So can he do it? The Gemara is going to resolve the inquiry. It's going to say, it is forbidden, for if you say that it is permitted to do so, he will surely gather even the small ones, and he will clear his entire field on Sheviis. So if you say, okay, the first time you clear the biggest ones. Now you come back a second time, the biggest ones are gone, the medium ones are left. You take all the medium ones that are left, because now these are the largest ones, and you've gotten rid of all of the medium ones. And then you have all of the smaller ones, because those are the biggest ones that are left. And you say, oh, okay, let me get the smaller ones too, because these are the biggest ones, right? So you did 3 trips, and you basically cleared your whole field for preparation for plowing, and you've increased your arable land that you can get ready for the 8th year for plowing or even whatever, and you're not allowed to clear your field on Sheviis. Now the Gemara is going to present another problem and question relating to this original rule that was dealing with only gathering the large sticks, stones, and grasses from his own field. The Gemara says, if one's field was full of only large sticks, stones, and grasses, so that he is unable to leave any small ones in the field to demonstrate his intent and to show that it's not to clear the field of planting, is there a method in which he's permitted to gather the large ones? So let's say that the field doesn't have any medium-sized sticks and there's no small-sized sticks. It's only large branches. The question here is, hey, if I take out these large branches, they're large, but now I've effectively cleared it because now there's no small ones and medium ones, and there's no branches at all. So am I allowed to do it? So the idea, is going to be, he doesn't have any small ones there to show that his intent was to take it for firewood. So maybe he has to leave some large ones. So the Gemara is going to show that there's a maloket between the Tanaim about what to do on this one. And the Gemara says there are two Mishnayot that dispute the law in this case. One Mishnah says that it is permitted for him to collect the large ones in this way. And the other ones say that it is forbidden to collect the large ones in this way. And the Mishnah is going to talk about the permit. So again, this is a case where you have a field, and it's your field, and it's back in the day when you're allowed to clear your own field before they were playing games. And the question is, what happens if you have only the large ones? In other words, there's only very, very large sticks and branches. And there's no medium ones, and there's no small ones. And so if you take the large ones, there's nothing left. You've cleared the field. So the question is this going to be allowed or not? Gemara says, someone clearing stones from his field may remove the upper ones, but must leave those that touch the ground. So the idea here is that the Mishnah is telling us that it is permitted to clear the large ones in this way. In other words, that if you have the stones that are being cleared and they're all the same size, they're all large, the Mishnah is basically saying, and we covered this before in chapter 3, as long as he's leaving the stones that are touching the ground, it demonstrates that his intent is not to clear the field for planting, and it's really, he's really leaving it over. So in the same way, let's say, you had, there was just no small sticks, no small stones, and no small grasses. You're allowed at this time, when they had this, you would be allowed to clear the large ones from the field, as long as you're leaving some of this behind to demonstrate this intent. You didn't clear out all the sticks. It would be forbidden. This is basically describing that it would be forbidden to clear out all, even if it's only large. So, the idea is that in a case where there's no small and medium ones, you're not allowed to remove all the large ones. You'd have to leave some of them to show that his intent is not to clear the field, because in fact, he would have cleared the field, and that's the problem. So there's the dissenting Mishnah. This is going to be, by the way, in chapter 4, Halacha 4, going to be coming up. And it's going to be talking over there in chapter 4, Halacha 4, talking about someone who thins out a grove of densely planted olive trees. And over there, Bet Shammai is going to be saying in that Mishnah in chapter 4, Halacha 4, he's going to say that he can raise the tree to the ground, but he might not uproot it. In other words, he can cut it down to the stump. And Bet Shammai is going to be saying that he may uproot it. And Bet Hillel is going to be saying and agreeing that one who clears a patch in a grove may not do so unless he merely raises the trees, but he does not need to uproot them. So the question is going to be, well, what is going to be thinning? Okay, so that's what this Mishnah over there is talking about. And it's going to say, what is the case referring to as thinning in which Bet Hillel permits uprooting the trees, like, by the way, what they're going to allow uprooting. Bet Shammai is not going to allow the uprooting. They're going to say that you have to cut it down to the stump. So in what case are you going to be allowed to uproot it? And again, this is from Mishnah 4 in chapter 4. And the idea is that the Gemara says removal of one or two of the trees from among three adjacent trees. So removing three adjacent trees is going to constitute clearing, in which case Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel are going to agree that uprooting them is forbidden, because this activity is going to be seen as clearing the trees in order to plant. And in the same way, in a case where you have an absence of sticks and stones and grasses, it is forbidden to clear the large ones from the field, even if he leaves some of them behind in demonstration of his intent. And, this is the Mishnah that tells us that it is forbidden to clear even the large ones in this way, even if you're going to leave some of them. In other words, that, it's going to be hard to understand, because the Rambam is ruling in accordance with both Mishnayot, and it would look like it contradicts, the premise here of this Gemara, that the two Mishnayot are giving different opinions. So the Pnei Moshe says about this that, the Gemara resolves the inquiry leniently from the first Mishnah that we cited, which is that you're going to have to leave over some of it. And the second Mishnah is there to point out that there is a dissenting opinion, and basically it's going to be that Bet Shammai is going to be holding that even thinning it is forbidden to uproot the trees. And Bet Hillel is going to be permitting it, which, by the way, the first Mishnah is also going to be permitting it. And in the same way, this is how they permit uprooting when thinning it. And according to the Rambam, he's basically ruling in accordance with Bet Hillel, who does not contradict himself by ruling also in accordance with the first Mishnah. So basically, this is how you're going to get around it, which is that basically they're saying that there's no conflict, that in the first case, you have to leave some over, and basically the idea with Bet Hillel is that they're gonna permit uprooting at the same time that you're thinning, so that some of it's still there. So that's another way to look at it. So the Gemara is going to now talk about clearing out only the large sticks, stones, and grasses from the field, and leaving the small ones behind. And we didn't cover that case yet. So this is going to demonstrate, by leaving out the small and medium ones, it's going to demonstrate that this field has not been cleared in preparation for planting. And now the Gemara is going to talk about what ramification this has on a Kol HaMoed. Because again, on Kol HaMoed, you're not allowed to exert yourself. That's a Torah requirement. So the Gemara says it is also permitted on the festival of Kol HaMoed to do so. That's the question. And it's basically asking, on Kol HaMoed, are you allowed to take the large sticks and leave behind the small sticks? Perhaps you need it for firewood. And the Gemara is going to talk about this with a brisa. And the Gemara says there was a Tana was found who taught a person may gather large sticks and grasses from his field in the same manner that he gathers from his neighbor's field both small and large ones. And this is permissible, however, only on Sheviis, but not on the festival. You can't do it on Kol HaMoed. Why? Because excessive exertion. And, the rabbis are going to be more stringent with Kol HaMoed because, it's very inconvenient for people to haul off large sticks of firewood. And on Sheviis, you're allowed to do it. There's no restriction on exerting yourself on Sheviis, but there is on the festival. Now, the Gemara is going to focus on, part of the Tana's ruling, and it's going to be talking about during Sheviis, a person may gather large sticks and grasses and stones from his field, and the Gemara is going to be asking. Now, again, keep in mind, why do they need to gather this stuff at all? Well, they need the material, right? They need the firewood. Perhaps they need to make charcoal. Perhaps they need to fuel their oven, or warm their house, or perhaps they need to feed their donkey, or perhaps They need to use the grasses for straw to, thatch a roof. If you take straw and you mix it with mud, you can make it into very good quality bricks, and you can thatch things, and you can, use it to also to basically like make new ovens. So if you mix straw together with wet clay, you can basically make along like a wood frame, you could basically make a new oven. Now, so, there's a lot of reasons you need this material. Again, the prohibition is not building new ovens or making bricks or, building things or fueling your oven. There's no prohibition on that. The prohibition is getting your field ready to plant on it. That's the prohibition. Now, if this material is laying there, that's what the trick is, okay? And again, if you're just going to an ownerless field, nobody owns it. It's an ownerless area in the Jerusalem hills, and you're collecting firewood, then, it's Sheviis, you're not doing anything wrong, okay? It's ownerless, and the field is ownerless, and the wood is ownerless, and nobody's planting there anyway. So you're not doing anything wrong. The question is when it's your field. So there's going to be a Gemara that talks about this Baraisa, and the Gemara says, a Tana was found who grants permission to do so with regards to stones. So we can assume that this preceding Tana would also permit it regarding stones. Now keep in mind that the last Gemara that we talked about was talking about grasses and sticks. Stones are not mentioned in this Gemara, but in this second Baraisa, it's going to be giving permission to remove stones. So stones is missing in the first Baraisa. So basically, you see this permit of clearing stones in a way that demonstrates that his intent is not to clear the field for planting. It's to get the building material. That's the idea. The stones are going to be used for building material. And the question is going to be, how do you know the difference? How do you know if he's using it for building material or if he's using it to secretly clear the field and make it easier for him to plow the field in the 8th year? And the Gemara says his heart knows whether the person's intent is for a netting, in other words, to use the stones for building, or for perversity, in other words, to transgress the law by clearing the field for planting. So the idea is that in this case, you can see the person's intent for collecting the stones, and perhaps it could be for building. And the idea is that the person in his heart knows whether he's really trying to be honest and cheat himself or not, because we have a rule that in Shemayim that they know your thoughts and they know your intentions, and you're paid for it. So there was a phrase that's coined regarding an incident which occurred, and here's the incident. And the Gemara goes like this: Rabbi Yossi says in the name of Menachem, as Rabbi Akiva was performing his duty of investigating the populace for Sheviis transgressors, and as was his custom, in other words, because he had this community position, Rabbi Akiva would go out and protest against these wrongdoers who are violating Sheviis. And that is the way of the Jews, is to keep Sheviis in the land. And so the Gemara, is pointing out this was his custom to go out and inspect the area that he lived in. And the Gemara says that he saw a person pruning his vineyard. And Rabbi Akiva says to him, he says, is it not forbidden to prune your vineyard on Sheviis? And the farmer said to him, he says, I need the vines to use as netting for an olive press. In other words, he would make a lattice work and he would hold down the pile of olives while they're being pressed, and the vines would basically be used as a netting to help to press down these olives. And olive vines are supple, but they're also very strong, and especially when they're moist, because they haven't dried out. So the Gemara says to them, the Gemara says that the farmer said to him, I need the vines to use as netting for an olive press. And Rabbi Akiva replied to him that if this is the case, that you're using the netting as an olive press, it is surely allowed. However, the heart knows whether your intent is truly for netting or for perversity. In other words, your heart really knows if you're transgressing the law or not. And by the way, you will be paid for it. Now, there's a lot of interplay here. The word ekel is going to be the root of the word for ikul, which is netting, and also for perversity, which is akul kolet. So basically, there's an interplay on words there. And basically, what Rabbi Akiva is pointing out in Shemayim is that heaven knows your intention. And, if you want to play games with the halacha and make it very hard for people to determine whether it's legitimate or not, and it looks like you're following the law, but you're really playing games with it, well, Hashem knows you didn't trick anybody, and you'll still be paid, and you'll still be punished accordingly, and there is measure for measure. So in some way, if this farmer were cheating, he will pay the punishment for cheating on Sheviis. And same too in your life. If you are trying to play games with the halacha and make it look like you're following the halacha, but your intention is really to play games with it, then, Hashem knows. And, you'll pay accordingly. Have a great day.